And good evening there. My name is Aussie Stone, a country Victorian gamer of Star Wars Armada, Star Wars Legion, X-Wing, Battletech and many other games. Today is part 2 of my work on my auto shop, and now I am starting the painting process. As you can see, I've already undercoated it, and I have undercoated it in a uniform grey on the outside and on the inside a chaos black. Now I am speeding up all the film clips of this simply because there's a lot of gaps in between, and really it may not be of interest to everyone. As you can see, the actual wood, the burning of the process of the wood as when it was assembled in my last video is still quite noticeable through it. And as you can see, I've already done some test colours of some terracotta there on the brickwork. I still have a fair bit of painting still to do, which is why it's around. And it's also important to note that when I painted it, I didn't quite get in all the nooks and crannies, so it may be the reason why you need to go through it. I've also magnetized the door now. I've got 4 magnets in each of the corners. They're like 2mm magnets, and I've also done it on the doors as well. So now I can either have the door open or the door closed, and it's a good size for the models, just like the Imperial bunker opening, pretty much. Anyway, as I said, the main undercoat has been this uniform grey, or a cold grey, and now I need to basically make it a bit more alive. I want to put in a little bit more of the terracotta on the back, and I also want to put in some more colours throughout the model itself to make it a bit more alive. So starting off with that terracotta, and you can see that there is shaped areas where the brickwork is appearing, and I just put a little bit of the red terracotta colour from Game Colour on my brush, and I just basically generally work from the centre of the model, some of the edges, and just put it down. While it's still wet, I can actually wipe it off with my finger a little bit, and I want to do just a couple of brickworks to indicate maybe the paint has actually just fallen away or needed to be replaced. I'm also using a little bit of a copper or a bronzed colour to do some of the piping around these pipes at the side of the model, as well as near the air conditioner. One thing to note with doing MDF is that you do need to put a good undercoat colour in. If you do not put a good undercoat and cover as much of the model as possible, it is quite often the case that the subsequent colours that you put on top of it gets lost or absorbed into the wood very often. So just putting a little bit more bronze on the power regulator, as well as some of the pipings on the AC units on the top. I want to ensure that when I do a lot of the colours, I'm pretty much just getting those areas that I want it to be in, which is why you can see me wearing some magnifying glasses. You'll also note that I'm not painting everywhere. I'm just doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You can see that I'm using some dry brush techniques to just sort of put some weathering metal look over the top of the grate. You'll also see that I will do a lot of the weathering via washes. So I'm putting some null wash and also some flesh wash in areas just to in some way stain the likes of the AC and also the surfaces of the roof. just to give it that weathered look, that slightly run down look that I want to go for this. I also want to put a little bit of metal on the likes of the water heater unit, as well as on some of the other vents area, simply because, like I said, I don't want just a single color throughout. Now, just doing the door panel, which I also think is actually not bad having it in a metal color, and continue to do a little bit more around that power regulator, this time with the actual gunmetal color. And I'll also do a little bit around some of the, I guess, the cabling areas for this. Now, while it's up, you can see that it's all, the inside of the garage is all black. I did that simply because the steps, you can see straight through them, and having black behind it does give the illusion that there's nothing there really interesting. I also want to eventually, if I am able to find the right types of extra bits, to actually do a bit more complete garage area. So that's a long-term project. You'll see that I'm dry brushing a bit of metal onto that garage door, just using the tank brush and very lightly putting in some ways, a very dry coat of metal. This gives it a bit more of a brushed look, and also gives it a chance for fading. Now I'm just sort of cleaning up some of those areas that I've already done in the terracotta, but rather than using a uniform grey, I'm using a different colour grey, primarily because I want to show a little bit of difference. I want to almost indicate that this has been painted multiple times. Some paint has been flaked and worn. I also want to use some of the metal colours just to reinforce the likes of the vents along the sides and edges. And like I've said, using some of that metal colour for dry brushing. I'm also going to put a little bit of a light or a ghost grey colour over the top of the water heater to denote that in some ways it's a separate entity than the actual main model itself. It's not sort of one fabricated building block of everything. It needs to have multiple colours. So just running around the sides. And of course, with most houses, usually their water heater is not exactly the same colour as the rest of the house. I'm also going to use some of that null wash or null oil to just run it around the windows to darken the windows. Just basically staining the wood in some ways to just make it slightly off colour than a flat grey that the rest of the model currently has. Now the next thing I wanted to use is a ash grey. I'm going to put it on the doorway just once I mix it a bit more. I don't want like a white doorway, simply because it is an outside thing. It needs to basically be pitted and weathered. So whether or not it's going to remain this colour will depend on how well this wood takes, and also the drying process, to see if that grey still remains light or if it blends in a bit more. As you can see, it didn't, so I had to go back, and instead I'm using a leather brown, also from Game Colour, to shade in the doorway, and this gives it a point of difference from the rest of the model. This is pretty much the first main colour that you will see I am using that is not the grey, and you can see that all the panels are there, and I'm going to select a few of the panels, paint them this leather brown colour, but I'm not going to do a thick colour on most of them. I'm going to do a few thick, but then some of them I'm actually going to do a dry brush technique on it to sort of have it so that some of the paint has worn off. So those three that I've already done is just very heavy. This is almost a lighter version. So I'm only putting like half the amount of paint that I usually do for the first three panels on the brush, and then using that brush to actually spread it out more, so it's almost giving it a ghost effect, and you'll be able to see some of the bleed through colour of the grey underneath on those panels. This one again I'm doing fairly heavily, and you can actually see the cold grey colour that I used previously is now coming forward, and you can actually see it on the side. The roof, on the other hand, you will see now that I'm going to put a little bit of the leather brown colour and then draw it down with the tank brush, just dry brushing it and just giving it a more weathered look on the surface of the roof. I'll be also doing the edges of this main section, also using this dry brush technique. And I find that using this grey underneath and this leather brown in a very light way does give the impression of in some ways of a rust or corrosion effect, without the need to go and use the quite hard to find corrosion effect color range. I could also do this in the likes of using a flash wash, but I do find with some of the flash washes that doing it on the wood, like I am, it will disappear quite easily. So by doing it with a slightly dry brush technique of the leather brown will actually hold the colour a lot more. And as you can see the main roof now in that brown versus the walkway, which is still in that uniform grey look. As such. Now I'm going to keep on going and paint this little, I guess, bulkhead that I added on in a different colour entirely. This is in the Talaran sand that I use for quite a lot of things. I wanted to put something on that can give the appearance that this has come from an entirely different building or different material that maybe they suffered a break-in, or maybe it had some accidents and I just wanted to have something on it that they've just basically bolted on. I also made the decision that I wanted to do the rails in a metal colour, and once I finish with the metal, I'll also put some null oil on that metal just to give it a bit more darker look. The main thing that I need to do is make sure that with the rails that I paint all the surfaces, both the tops, the bottoms, the insides, and also the outside, which does take a bit extra to do. And I may also miss a few bits and pieces while I'm doing this, so I will have to go back and check it. I'm also going to do these rails, the rungs, up to the roof area in that gunmetal look as well. To do a good proper job, I do need to lift up the model, adjust it so that I can see the underside, and then I can make a start on the other railway railing on the outside, and then work my way from one end to the other. And then work on the far side on the insides. At this point, I want to put a little bit more colour underneath that power distributor area. And I also want to do a dry brush of some of the metal onto one or two of the panels on one side, and then go back to that leather brown to do a few more panels on this side that will be the same on the other side. The combination of the leather brown and the grey, like I said, pretty good. Mix in with the terracotta on the back, it is quite nice. Gives it very much an urban, but not totally a dirty urban look. It more looks more rural than anything else. So again, like I did on the far side, I'll do a few of the panels with a much thicker leather brown, and then do a few of the panels in that light dry brush technique of the brown. Similar to the other side, I'm also going to use the same technique on some of the top panels on this wool as a point of reference, that you will be able to see that some of the colour is similar on both sides, much like it's trying to be a uniform colour, the building itself, but maybe the person didn't complete the full job. At this point, I'm just putting a little bit of colour on the front for the likes of the door controls to indicate when it's locked and how to open it as well. So a little bit of red for the top and a little bit of green on the bottom. Now I'm going to put a bit of yellow here on the banners. Now, if I was going to actually want it a pure yellow, I'd be probably doing a undercoat of a white or a tan color first, because as you can see, you can actually see the bleed through of the grey underneath it and all the streaks of the yellow. But again, this is not a very, I guess, expensive or used a lot of money, so I want to give the impression that this person being that owns the shop may not have had all the money or all the technology to do huge amounts. I will now let it dry a bit over those panels and then do a bit more crafting soon. I've now used a Aurbesh translator on my computer to write up two signs. The one on the left is Joe's Tech Station, while the small one is Office. I've used an Artline pen, which works pretty well on most surfaces, to do the drawing. I've also done a little bit of graffiti of a Mando helmet and an arrow at the back. Now all I just need to do is take it out to the shed to give it a final coat of varnishing, and that's about it. Here's some images of my next project of my commandos. But for now, please like, please subscribe, leave a comment, and I will see you on the table next time. Bye for now.